Okay, we're live. What's up, everybody? We're gonna do a few things in this live stream. I'm just gonna wait for the stream to catch up here. Nice to see everybody here. I want to actually first and foremost let me know how the audio levels are. Trying something new this time around to make sure it doesn't clip, but if it's too quiet, just let me know and I'll change that. Looks like everything is working fine. I did also want to mention that I just straight up didn't see that there were some other audio related streams going on, and so that's why I postponed it for an hour. Normally we would just try and go a little earlier in the day, but because I know folks are all over the place and not all in the same time zone, but it's gotten to a point where there's a lot of folks streaming on the weekends, so in an effort to be sort of respectful to other people, we had to delay this for about an hour, but I hope everybody had a good chance to check out that stream that I linked. If you haven't, do go check out Marcello's channel. Plenty loud? Okay, awesome. Awesome, good to see everybody in the chat there. What mic do you use? This is the AT2020, but I don't recommend it. Yeah, you can do a lot better these days than the AT2020. This is an old microphone. Okay, so I guess what I'm going to do here is talk about the LCD-X here, and then I also have the LCD-XC. You guys already probably know this, XC Carbon here. And so what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to show you guys the measurements of these if you haven't seen them already. I've already done the measurements on the Gross system here, and so and the measurement process is very time consuming because you can't just put it on the rig and then push a button and then off you go. It's a lot of it is ensuring that you are getting the right results and that your results agree with how you hear it subjectively, because these industry standard rigs, yeah, I mean they're not as good as the 5128, but they are the standard for a reason. They are predictive of sound quality and rated for accuracy up to 10K. So, or at least they're predictive of tonal balance. At the very least, we could say that. So, what I'm going to do in this video is or in this live stream, I guess, is I'm going to show you guys the measurements of these each, and then I'll do one first and then the other, and then I'm going to be building out an EQ profile. Now I've already got an EQ profile built out for the XC Carbon, and so for that one I'll just show you my EQ profile, but again it's not based on I'm not just EQing it to the Harman target here. I'm doing something a little differently, and also with these it's very difficult to make your adjustments, and it's very difficult to sort of make the adjustments that you make sense with what you see in the measurement, because they do sort of have a unique coupling to the side of the head in the sense that the pads here are a huge component of this, or a massive component to this. For anybody who's unaware of what's going on here, what happened is that sometime, I think near the end of last year, Audeze changed the pads on the LCD-X and the LCD-XC. Now they also changed something else. I believe they did change the magnetic circuit. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that's what it said in their post. So there is some other change there as well, but it might just be a change for the sake of the conjunction of these pads, or it could just be a change because it's not just you change one parameter and then that means you maybe have to change another parameter, right? So it might be that's going on, but it might also be that it was just a matter of efficiency and making it easier to produce. So this is something where, as far as the magnetic circuit changes that are involved, I would just rely on that post that I did link it in the forum thread below, but then I also linked or I haven't linked the Headphone thread, but that's where they originally posted it, but I basically cross-posted that to the forum. So I will be, I guess I'll be addressing some of that and what was actually changed as well. But there are also things that your guess is as good as mine. Specifically, what that actual magnetic circuit change is, because that is also news to me. But yeah, so without further ado, let me, I'll show you guys the measurements here. Marius, thank you. Good to see you again. Given the circumstances, shot of tequila instead of coffee. Also, new LCD-X versus VC. Wait, do you mean XC versus VC? Because, I mean, like, if you're looking for a closeback, there's a massive benefit to the VC in that it's more lightweight and it's more comfortable. So that's a tough one. And man, I've been really loving my Verite with my new EQ on it. So it's a really tough call there between the two. I think it's, do you want a dynamic driver presentation or do you want a planar? But I do think that the LCD-XC's technical performance is at least as good as the VC's. So you can get a lot for your money there. Although that one, I think, yeah, in both cases, I would do some EQ, but not everybody's into that. So, okay. You're late. What equipment are you listening / live testing with? Do you mean like amps and stuff? By the way, that's another thing. These LCD-X and XCs, they hardly take any power whatsoever. You can run them off of just about anything. Now, like, that's much to, the chagrin of audiophiles who have, high-end amplifiers. And there are amplifiers where, like my Kai IH6 here, can't run it off of that. It's too, at least not the balanced output. So, because it's too powerful. So, but anyways, these are very, very easy to drive, and they don't really change that much with upstream equipment like Sennheiser HD650s or 600s and stuff like that, or even the Verite. So you get a lot of detail for, most of that, like 99% of that is just, the headphones, and then whatever, as long as you have a discrete amp and DAC, that's like a, even a Modi Magni stack would be totally fine. Okay, I'm going to show you guys the measurements now, and I'm just going to start with the LCD-X here, and minimize Rue here. Okay. So this is the LCD-X frequency response here, and actually what I should do is I should show you guys the previous one, which I don't have a good representation of it relative to this target because I developed this target afterwards. But this is what it used to measure like. So ignore the target here, but just look at the crazy negative ear gain going on. So that's how it used to measure, and that wasn't average. I just represented it that way. I've now moved to this method. So you can see it's a massive improvement overall. There are a few things to keep in mind. The first is that it does look like there's some bass roll off. So that's what we're going to figure out in this live stream, is whether or not this bass roll off is actually representative, or if this is a measurement artifact due to the measurements being done on an ear and cheek simulator, not an actual human head, right? Because there are contours to the side of the human head that aren't reflected in a ear and cheek simulator. No ear and cheek simulator. The closest thing to that would be the B&K 5128. Like even the Hatzes from B&K and from Gross, the other 711 couplers, are not really as accurate as a proper human head. And the closest thing to a proper, like a full real human head, is the B&K 5128, which is like ridiculously expensive. So I don't want to take anything away from the 711 couplers, because that's also what I use here, and it is an industry standard or standardized rig. And this is like what people should use. Even right now, people should use the 711 couplers like for comparing measurements, right? So for readability's sake, this is what we should be using. But the limitation is that it is not, like if you think about the side of a human head, there's tissue and bone structure here, whereas, and that's just not available on any, Hatz or ear and cheek simulator. So apart from the 5128. And even then, it's like, I don't know if the tissue perfectly matches. But in any case, so the first thing is the bass. Here's that we're going to check out, and we're going to see if that matches with, we'll use in-ear mics for that. And then, there is ear gain here. Now it looks like it's still a little bit subdued there in the 4K region. So that's the other thing I want to test, with this. And what I'm going to do, if you're not familiar with measurements, definitely check out that video that I did on how to reach frequency response, because it involves understanding the difference between raw and compensated measurements. These are raw that I'm showing you here. And what I'm going to end up doing with in-ear mics is I'm going to eventually show a compensated measurement, compensated against the HiFi-Man Sundara, which from whatever the current revision is. And the reason for doing that is I need to actually ground it to an actual headphone, because this target curve hasn't been extrapolated and developed for in-ear microphones. And of course, you're missing a major gain factor there, being the ear canal and eardrum resonances. You're only getting pinna and concha interaction. So it'll look totally different. So you have to run those compensated to make any sense of those. And so that's why what I'll be doing is I'll be using the Sundara's measurement on my own head as the compensation for that, because at the very least, I know that in this region, the Sundara measures quite well. So we'll check that. But for the rest of it, it looks so much better than the original, than the one from early 2020 and late 2019. So yeah, we'll go through that. And then after this, we'll dive into some Q&A and talk a little bit about these changes that have happened, because I think it's worth clearing up some stuff. But I'm just going to check back with the chat, make sure everybody is with us here. Yeah. If you guys are confused about anything, do let me know. But I most likely will be, just reading the chat and checking, as we go through this. So let me get into the in-ear microphones, and then eventually what we'll do here is I'll develop an EQ profile for it. So first thing, let's check the bass response. Let's see if this works. Hey, there we go. Okay, so and if anybody's wondering, I am using Rue for the software. And I don't think you guys might hear the sine sweep. I have the desktop audio muted, but you might hear it coming through the headphones because these are open back. Yeah. That's a good question. Does this release devalue the 2020 version of the X? Yes and no. If you EQ it, not really. I mean, the question about value and like if you're going to resell it, then the answer is yes, because most people would probably prefer this one over the 2020 version, right? But as far as the value to you, you would effectively be able to achieve the same sound quality because they do handle EQ extremely well. So, no. Okay. And for this test, I'm actually gonna take the glasses off. Oh, one other thing I'm gonna test during this stream is where the resonance frequency is with this. I have already done that test, but I'm curious to do it again, because that is one of the parameters, like where the resonance drop off is one of the more interesting parameters. That if you think about like the DCA headphones, I saw somebody mention it in the chat there, the DCA headphones sound super dead in the sense of they have no macro dynamics. Now the Audezes do have pretty good macro dynamics, right? The full-size Audezes. So the question in my mind is that one unique characteristic about the measured behavior of the DCA headphones when you introduce an air gap is whether or not that's not present here, because if that's the case, then that's an indicator that maybe we should be looking at where the resonance frequency is, to at least give some indication of slam, or at least a measured indication. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we can look at where that is and go, okay, this is going to have slam and this won't, but it's a possibility, and that's one I want to explore. Where could one buy one of these microphones, and how expensive are they? I don't remember how expensive they were. In the $100, not ranges, not thousands. And I had these custom made, so you'd have to talk to somebody to make them, or maybe you can buy them. I'm not sure, but I had these ones custom made. Am I talking my preferences or Harman profile? So Harman profile is predictive of what most people prefer. So it's not about my preferences here. I have my preferences are at least above 1K are pretty close to Harman, but I do still deviate to a certain extent there. So, and especially in the lower mids and that range, I kind of deviate as well. But yeah, so for the in-ear mics, we're not going to be using Harman here. We're we're going to be using the Hi-Fi Man Sundara, which is basically Harman, at least above 1K. That's really what we're looking at. And actually for this one specific test, I guess you can maybe hear that, we're not gonna be compensating. We're just gonna be looking at bass level. That's gonna be really loud. This is not, it is the rig here that we're using here. So our Gross rig is calibrated. SPL calibrated, but in-ear microphones, obviously. I'm just using the interface. Okay. Let us give it a shot. So, check from 20 hertz. Looks like the bass is actually, it looks like it does drop a little bit here, but not, it extends further than I thought. So you could probably expect a little bit of a drop there at around 30. Let's try it again. Same thing. And keep in mind that, there's a very thin cable going here. I don't think it's going to have an impact, but there's always a possibility. Yeah, so it actually looks like there's more and better bass extension. I guess hold on, I'll just flip it over so you guys can see what I'm looking at here. So, hold on. Let me just switch this up so you guys can actually see what's going on here. So I saw somebody asking about, whoa, that's huge. All right, there we go. So I saw somebody asking about if they're going to be releasing a new X open back coming in April. I assume you mean for Audeze. I have no idea. They've not told me anything. I'm not, I'm not aware of any new products. The only thing that I'm aware of that they released recently was the Euclid, but yeah. Stop. No. Okay. So this is what I'm saying. This is not a Gross measurement. Okay. This is the Gross measurement. Okay. And this is, if you're saying this is typical Audeze, this is pretty good for the most part, except for what's going on here. That's sort of the only thing that's not ideal. All right. Whereas if you're looking at this is with in-ear microphones, which completely misses the ear canal and bass and eardrum resonance. So you're not going to get so you can't compare this to a Gross measurement. Okay, that's the thing that I was worried about. Right. Now I'm going to compensate this. So give me 1 second here. Take a look at this Gross again. I'm going to compensate it with the Sundara measurement here if I can find it. There we go. Yeah, it's SPL calibrated, but not with in-ear mics, because with in-ear mics I have to use the interface. That's basically where you're getting the sensitivity. But on the Gross rig, yeah, absolutely, it's calibrated. So this measurement here that I'm showing, that is absolutely calibrated. And calibrated, not compensated. All right. It's always weird when you're doing this because you have to boost the. Here, I'll show you guys again. I'm not sure you guys can see this, but I'll make it smaller so that it doesn't intrude. Now, the last one, we're gonna throw it up there. So here is, I'm just gonna try and increase this size here. This is what we could expect the relative spectral balance to be for the Audeze LCD-X. So this is compensated, okay? And so the answer is yes, it is still withdrawn there in the upper mids and lower treble, and elevated in the upper treble slightly, but not actually as much as I thought. And this is relative to the Sundara, okay? So I've used the Sundara's frequency response as the compensation for this. So a slightly relaxed treble presentation here is relative to the Sundara is what we can expect, and upper mid range as well. But as we saw here, right, that kind of matches where this is, right? So remember, the Sundara is very close to this, not exactly, but it's very close. So that's kind of what's going on here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and build an EQ profile for this. I'm going to say right now, though, like definitively, this headphone is this is EQ optional. The previous LCD-X, like the one from early 2020 or like late 2019, early 2020, that one I think would be EQ required, whereas this one is definitely EQ optional. So let me dive into Equalizer APO and seeing how it. Remembering that the Sundara does at around 30 hertz also kind of like 20, maybe 30 to 40 hertz does also, roll off just a little bit, right? It doesn't have the Harman bass shelf. What we're going to do here is we are going to boost the bass at around, let's go 120, and we're going to boost it by about 2.5, and we're going to make that a low shelf filter here, right? Just going to turn this on for now and go negative 5.5. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is the mids are pretty good here, so I'm going to skip most of this stuff. The Sundara is also a little bit relaxed, just a little bit, in the, I guess, somewhere between 2.5 and 3K. Well, maybe like around, right around 2.5K. So it looks like this is too, so that's fine. Mainly, we want to go from about 3.5 to about 7-ish. I don't really want to mess too much with this because this is also where the constant interaction is. And if you start messing with that, you can introduce this shimmering quality, which is not good. So let's go with 4K for now. And I'll of course revisit this, and because we may need to make some other adjustments here with Q values down here. For anybody who's unaware, this is your Q value, and that is how narrow or how wide your adjustments are going to be. And ideally, you want them to be, you want to stay on the wider side unless you are very confident in what you're doing, because I almost want to say, unless you have a measurement rig, stick on the wider side and don't go above 3, because you can really mess stuff up if you go above 3. Like adding narrow peaks and dips and stuff. And then, okay, so that's 4K. Now 6K is also a bit relaxed. I'm gonna throw it up at around 6.4. So 6.4. And remember as well that these do affect one another depending on how wide the Q value is. So it looks like our overall increase here is 4, which would mean that we would have to go -4 to avoid clipping, but we actually need to go like more than that, which is 4.1 here, because they do impact one another slightly. So I've gone a little bit more. The closer they would be, or the wider the Q value, the more they would impact one another. So that doesn't really look like what we want. So that means I'm going to change this to 2, and then change this to 2, and see what we get. That looks a little better, doesn't it? Maybe we can go 6,300. See, and this goes up, right? That's kind of what I was talking about there. And because I'm also a little treble sensitive, I'm going to err on the side of caution. There we go. And now there is one other thing I want to do here. If you look at this upper treble splash sizzle air stuff, I think is a little high. So I'm going to try and reduce that a little bit. And that does come through in the in-ear mics as well. So in the in-ear mics, it's looking like basically 10K, 11K, 12K, well, 13. Yeah. So I'll hit it kind of in the middle there. We'll go 11.7. And I might need to do more adjustments in here, so I'll leave a little bit of room, but just a little bit. And I'm gonna go with 3.5 here, just because as you go higher up, those adjustments will token a wider range anyways. So that looks kind of what I would want. But we don't know. We always have to test afterwards with our ears. Okay, now let's measure again. If you're feeling a little cheated, Marius, just use the EQ profile that I built for the previous one. So that's the main point of this, is that I have to now build a new EQ profile for the LCD-X 2021. Yes, it does measure better than the previous one, but if you just use the EQ profile from the previous one, you'll end up having it sound the same or pretty close, within the ballpark of the EQ profile that gets made for the one that's in 2021, right? That's really all that's going on there. Now I need to, once again, find the compensation file for this. There it is. Because we can't use raw measurements here. And I'm going to adjust it up so you guys can see it. And that's essentially what we did. I might want to actually increase the volume here because we did reduce it by about 5.5. So all right, so this is looking good. The thing that unfortunately happened is that this 2.5K region got boosted a little bit as well. Now again, keep in mind that on the Sundara, that 2.5K region is a little bit withdrawn, so I'm not too worried about that. The main thing is I don't want the 3.5K region to be quite like that. So I'm gonna try and adjust this down a little bit. 3800 and maybe see, now that's looking not as good. Yeah, we'll stick there. And we may have to adjust 2.5 down a little bit. Maybe just 1.5 and see how that goes. Because this, yeah, if not for this, this would look okay. And keep in mind, the little squiggliness doesn't matter. Like, that's just not really, at least for these types of measurements, because we're missing an entire gain factor, which is even the most significant gain factor. It's almost like this could have been dropped even more. Okay. I don't mind that it's boosted at 10K as much, because on the Sundara, again, where the concha interaction is, it's a bit shifted. So, and it is as well on this, just we're getting a bit of a 10K gap. So let's try it again. If you don't EQ, then I don't think Audeze's are for you. Okay. Oops, need to boost. I keep forgetting to do that. Right? That's not bad. That is really not bad. This is relative to the Hi-Fi Man Sundara. Okay, so looking at my EQ profile, I obviously have to listen to this and see how it sounds. But this is what I did. So I did one filter for the bass, two filters for the mids, two filters for the treble, right? Not really that much adjustment, not that many filters, very simple. I've just left it there. I was initially worried that this was a measurement artifact, but it's not. This is actually there, as at least on my head, right? The bass drop off here does seem to be a bit of a measurement artifact, although not that crazy. Like this seems accurate, but the 30 hertz to 50 hertz region doesn't have this kind of drop off going on. So I think that's just a measurement artifact of ear and cheek simulators and head and torso simulators not being actual human heads. So that's really all we're dealing with there. Okay, so that is the LCD-X profile. Let me just save this as LCD-X 2021. I did one before already using just Gross, so I'm just going to say in ears. Okay, so that's that profile done. And yeah, the max that we got here was 4.4, so dropping it by 5. I could drop it by less. I could drop it by 5 and it would be fine. Now, yeah, again, this is something that only applies to the 2021 versions of the LCD-X. If you're coming at this new, I see a whole bunch more people in here. So, and if I saw somebody asking earlier if the LCD-X 2021 is available right now, the answer is yes, it is. And so people have been buying it already for a while. Like, I think it was, yeah, I think they switched it over near the end of 2020. So, yeah, if you're buying one right now, as long as the dealer's not, sitting on a bunch of old stock, it's the same thing that happened with the Sundara. And let me be clear, you can buy it from anywhere. You can buy it directly from Audeze. You don't need to buy it specifically from one dealer. I'm not I'm not saying only one dealer has this. I'm saying dealers that go through lots of stock will be on this version. And also, if you're buying it directly from Audeze, it will also be this version. Okay, so that's the LCD-X. Let me now move to the LCD-XC. We'll do the same thing for that one. And then afterwards we'll do some Q&A. Yeah, I could do some music tests, but the music test, you won't be able to hear it. So I will double check that this sounds good. Because that is something that you always need to do. And what am I going to listen to? I have to mute myself here. You guys won't be able to hear it. Yeah, sounds fine. Again, this EQ is not essential. Not at all essential. So I can describe the difference, I guess, sort of what happens here, right? So when you apply this to this, right, it fills in this section here. and because it's boosted by like around 5 dB in that whole range, right? And this just gives a little bit more clarity there to this trailing ends of piano tones and acoustic instruments and things like that. If it didn't have this bump, the ear gain going on here at all, like the previous ones, it would have been super muffled, right? But because it has this ear gain bump to a certain extent, and it's balanced out by where the treble comes in as well, it's not the end of the world that the upper, mid, lower treble region is a bit more relaxed. So in some ways, if you listen to a lot of music with like electric guitars, you may actually prefer the relaxed region up here. And the whole thing, it doesn't sound dark, it doesn't sound muted or muffled whatsoever, even without EQ, like the previous one did. So that's the real advantage here. But then with this EQ, it fills in that range so that you get a lot more clarity there for certain instrument tones. Again, trailing ends of pianos is a good indicator for this. I do think there are recordings that are, especially again in the rock and metal and hard rock and that kind of stuff, where if you fill it in, it would be less desirable because it might be a little bit more, a little too clear there, where you might not want that much ear gain. But so yeah, I think this is 100% an improvement, and it's really just it just adds clarity. So let's move on to the XC, and I've got that saved. So let me just go back to I'll just go back to the equalizer default here, and then we'll build out the profile for that. I was gonna do actually like oh, you guys can hear the cops. Yeah, I was gonna do a separate video on each of these, and I might still. Certainly on the XC, I want to do a video, XC Carbon. And well, yeah, I'll do a full review of the new LCD-X, but I figured I might as well just do this live because I'm going to do this testing anyways. So, okay. Careful not to drop them. Switch it out. If anybody was wondering what amplifier I'm using right now, it is the Rebel amp. Oh, come on. By the way, Audeze cables are still the best in the business. Okay. So, nothing for EQ here. We're going to get rid of that. And pull up the XC. Pretty interesting, eh? This is the most non-Audeze, unlike Audeze tuning that I've ever seen. So let me first, I guess, talk a little bit about what's changed with the XC as well. So just like with the X, they did change the pads here from the memory foam stuff that they were using in the past. At least I think it was memory foam. People are talking about that. I'm not 100% sure that it actually was, or what that material was. But a lot of people are saying memory foam, so I'm going with that as well. But so that's the first thing that they changed. But then they also made, at least compared to the previous one that I had, they made it lighter by quite a bit. So this one weighs, I weighed it recently on the scale here. This one weighs 670 grams, like just 671 grams. The previous one was like over 750 grams. So that's a big deal. And so my guess, maybe what they did with the magnetic circuit change, maybe that was also in an effort to reduce the weight. And if anybody's wondering as well about the technical performance differences, I don't notice any. I'd have to have an old LCD-X side by side with a new one. But the other thing is the tuning differences are so, like, it's so dramatic that, at least on the LCD-X, that I don't think there'd be any change in the technical performance that would override the massive differences in the tuning. So I think that's really, it's much more about that. But to my ear, at least from memory, I don't think there's any difference as far as like the the detail and the slam and all that stuff. By the way, yes, the LCD-XC, I see somebody asking about it. The XC does slam a little harder than the X, but this is a closed back headphone, so there are some. I feel like there are some advantages to that, but also it elevates in the bass a little more. So the main thing here is that the upper mids is like way higher than the bass, so it's pretty interesting. So there's quite a bit of distance here between upper mids and lower mids. But actually, let me just in this case for the LCD-XC, the frequency response difference is not as dramatic as it was between the LCD-X and the new 2021 LCD-X. At least the LCD-XC that I had in the past, so the LCD-XC that was wooden that I had, that's I can show you the frequency response for that, but it's it's different enough, and this one actually takes less EQ, but I'd still say both of them would be EQ required. So let me just actually find that one here. This is XC. Yeah. So this is the previous one, right? With the wooden cups. So clearly this is weirder for the frequency response, but I EQ'd this one and I had it dialed in reasonably well, and they do handle EQ very well. But this one is way easier to EQ and dial in. That's really my point, I guess. But even the other one did have some ear gain too, so it's not like the negative ear gain that the old LCD-X had. See, right? So okay, let's go through this now. So the main thing that and by the way, just again, let me know. Make sure the audio is all good. Let me know if there's any weirdness going on there, or clipping. But the same thing here with the LCD-XC that I want to test here is the bass response. I do also have an EQ profile built out for this already, and I'm just curious. I'm going to run that one first, and if I find there's some weirdness there that I don't like, then maybe I will make a new one with the in-ear mics. But I'm more curious than anything else. With the bass level here, same thing that you saw with the LCD-X, it looks like it drops off, and this once again could be a measurement artifact with the ear and cheek simulator with these massive Audeze headphones, right? They, even when you put them on the ear and cheek simulator, on the hats, like they kind of like almost protrude past where the plate is. So, and the plate doesn't have, where the bone is here, so it doesn't have a chance to really contour properly to the head. So really that's what I'm checking here with in-ear microphones. I don't mind the forwardness here at a 1.5, around 1.5K, but if there's always a risk that this can sound a little bit honky, bordering on shout up here, which again is like the last thing that you think about when you think about Audeze. And then this is the obvious thing to fix here between like 5 and 6K, 5.8K. That bump is definitely audible. It does cause it to have a little bit of that sort of percussion compression. Yes, it is balanced out by the also substantially elevated air region at around like 13K or wherever that is, but that's also something that I would want to reduce, right? So yeah, so let me just run through this, and I'm gonna use the in-ear microphones again. The most neutral close back on the market. Frequency response has 80% to do with sound quality. 85%? I don't think I can really boil it down to a number, but if I had to, I'd say that's not unreasonable. And by the way, for anybody who's wondering, this is my personal LCD-XC carbon. FR tells nothing about the actual FR when multiple frequencies are being played simultaneously. Actually, it does. 100% it does. And that has to do with the fact that FR, at least as far as I understand it, is necessarily derived from either an FFT or something that you could also evaluate in FFT or real-time analysis, which is that in RU. But that's something that I'd need somebody else to explain, because even for me, that's like into the weeds. But apparently it is 100% derived from that. So frequency response actually does tell you everything about that. There would be some situations, like I could see a situation where if something's wrong, and you play something in real-time analysis, that where it shows up, having an effect somewhere else on frequency response. But then I think you'd probably also see that in the frequency response as well. So Ah, yes, getting into the minimum phase device question. Yeah, so this is also the other reason why CSD and so cumulative spectral decay or impulse response and all that stuff that's supposed to show, like ringing or yeah, decay, resonance, that kind of stuff. Apparently, that's also, it's not really giving you any new information that isn't already there in frequency response because headphones are minimum phase devices. Now, I can see the arguments from both sides, right? Where I think there might be some wiggle room is that maybe headphones are like only mostly minimum phase devices. Like maybe some headphones kind of violate that rule a little bit. So then you might get some stuff that shows up there in the time domain. And sorry, let me just kind of back up there. The reason for that is because time domain information is proportional to frequency response information in minimum phase devices, which is what headphones are supposed to be. But again, that's that last little bit there. What headphones are supposed to be is where I kind of say, yeah, there's probably room for some, some boundaries there. And maybe they're not 100% perfectly minimum phase devices. And so that could be why that could mean that there is something useful there. But really, I'd encourage you to read what Chocomel said on this. Read what Sean Olive and Floyd Toole have said about this. Well, mainly what Floyd Toole has said about this, and a number of other folks as well. But yeah. Anyways. Fast Fourier transforms are definitely not easy material. No, they are not. Yeah, I just want to address that one thing there. Yeah, so the XC apparently as well has the new, I guess an update. I don't. New is probably the wrong word here, but an update to the magnetic circuit. And again, I don't think this constitutes entirely new drivers. I think this is like an update to one component of the driver. Hey, Stuart, thank you. That's for wine, beer, and hot beverage. Thank you. I will definitely do that. It's a nice reminder. It's a holiday weekend, so I definitely need to do that. Rob, thank you. Are they pleasing to listen to? If that's your question. Yes, absolutely. I love the LCD-X and LCD-XC. Like, this is the thing for both of these changes and with both these headphones. This is awesome. We'll get into that shortly after I finish this, and we'll do some Q&A. But yeah, this is nothing but a good change for everything for both of them, and I'm very happy that they did that. Okay, let me now do the test. Close enough. Wait, did I have this applied? No, I didn't. Okay, good. So, looks like the bass drop off on this one is, again, not the same as what it shows on the Gross graph here. It's because, okay, so this is something that people should probably keep in mind when you're comparing measurements, right? But that are across different rigs, which is essentially what's going on here, right? I'm doing measurements with in-ear microphones, and I also have measurements done on the Gross. The information, all the information above like 700 hertz. I'm being conservative here. All the information above 700 hertz cannot be compared. All the information below, in theory, could, but I'm really only evaluating like 300 hertz and below. And that's because not only is the pinna different on the Gross rig from my own pinna, right? And all the features of the actual anthropometric ear. So like this piece is actually physically different. But also, when I'm measuring with in-ear microphones, it's not taking the measurement at the eardrum reference point. It's taking the measurement at the ear canal entrance reference point. So we're missing the entire ear canal gain factor and drum resonance that when you measure on the Gross rig it has. So it won't have any of this this information here. Now it's interesting because there are debates as to whether or not it's even whether those factors are compounding in a additive sense or compounding in a multiplicative sense. And my understanding is that additive is most likely what's going on. So you could, in theory, extrapolate that, but just from looking at it, you would never be able to compare them. So essentially, this is why we need to run compensations on in-ear microphones. I can get rid of the LCD X there. And let's go 85. All right. So, interesting. Wait, did I do that right? Yeah, Sandara. So yeah, I mean, it does look like the bass, and this is what I was talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about with with this Gross measurement here. Because if you think about how the Sandara measures on the Gross, which is, again, I'm using the Sandara as a compensation. The Sandara doesn't have this dip. The upper mids are not as far from the lower mids, so it doesn't have this contour here whatsoever. It's more just like a flat line all the way across. And then also, this particular area right here is where it's a little bit relaxed, right? So when you're using that as a compensation, that explains why this looks kind of the way that it does. And again, we see here that the upper mids there's a more significant distance here between the upper mids and the lower mids. So now let me try, I'm just more curious at this point because I have developed an EQ profile for this already. And I'm going to run it. Where is it? Yeah, I think that's it. Let's try it. And same thing. And this is going to be super bass boosted. Because what I did is I got it to match the Harman shelf, which the Sandara obviously doesn't match. So, did I? Okay. By the way, thank you, Rob. I did see that. Thank you. If you have another question, feel free to hit me up. All right. And so 85 plus 6, so I got to go 91. There we go. Oh, that's okay. Close enough. Okay, so relative to the Sandara, here's my EQ for this, right? And actually, I should show you guys this. Here's the LCD-XC after EQ. So you can see I boosted the bass to kind of match this target, right? This is a closeback, so I felt it's fine to have this sort of contoured lower mid-range. And then, yeah, I basically just got it to match the target reasonably well. Not perfectly, again, but close enough. In some ways, this is kind of close to like a 650 even in the treble. Not obviously in the air. That's still crazy boosted. So if you want to get this, then this is the profile that you would apply. So it's not a huge adjustment, or not a dramatic adjustment, but I have a lot of filters on this one. Or I say a lot, not that many, but still it's multiple filters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another profile here, and I'm going to, I guess, try and get it to be reasonably close. There we go. And let me just so just looking at that, yeah, so not that crazy of an adjustment, mainly just getting the upper mids and lower mids in line with one another. So what we're going to do here is, again, relative to the Sandara, which does roll off in the bass a little bit, I'm going to boost the sub bass by 2 dB. And we're going to fill in whatever's going on here, 320. Boosting that by about 3, and we'll go pretty narrow on that, 3.5. And I'm almost tempted to go more. was that 90, 80, 89 to 93? Yeah. Should be at least 4. And then, how should we handle the upper mids? Because the problem here is not that it has ear gain or that the upper mids are, you know, as high as they are. It's actually a good thing. Oh wait, sorry. This is. Let me wait. Did I do this right? Yeah, it is compensated. Yeah. So another way to achieve this would be to actually just boost the entire lower mids. But for the moment, let me just reduce these. So we're at 1.89. And yeah, I think maybe 2.5 here. We'll adjust that again later. And then what is this here? This is 3, right at 3K. It's interesting that see that yeah, okay, no, it does show up there. It's almost like that peak shifted either lower or higher up. Interesting. Whoops. Okay, where is it? 3K. And we'll reduce that as well by 2. We're just going to drop that whole region a little bit just to get everything a little bit more in line. And then this resonance here, we could probably, well, I'll leave it for now because that stuff's like, you know, super up in the treble. So let's try it. Now compensate it. Oops. It's too high. All right, that's a little more in line. It's ballpark. Still, that resonance peak is way up there. See, the nice thing about this too is that, like, while let me just try this again. I was gonna say, you know, with the Gross rigs, they're rated for accuracy up to 10K, but then they do show information above 10K, but they, you know, we don't know 100% the peaks that show up there, or the information that shows up there is where it actually is. And when using in-ear microphones, at the very least, it makes that region more readable. So we drop 13.91 by a little bit here. And normally this is something I wouldn't advocate for. Like, I wouldn't say you should do this because there's going to be a really narrow peak here. And again, this is using the Sundara as a compensation, right? So with Sundara, we don't know if there's a null there, right? If there's a null there, then that's going to exacerbate this, right? So that's why, like, you can't, like, this is not as good as using a Gross system, right? The Gross systems are better. This is just to test for bass level mostly, right? So I'm creating 2 EQ profiles here. Let's see which one I like better. Of course, I need to reduce this. And then, yeah, I'll in my full, you know, video review of both of them, or videos about both of them, I will be making a decision as to which one I prefer. So I'm going to go with 5 there, drop that by a bit. Okay, let's try this again. Oops. There, this time I can go 91. There we go. Yeah, drop that a little bit. So, yeah, I mean, again, relative to the Sundara, I think this is fine. Remember, Sundara rolls off in the bass, so we want a little bit more bass. I think we could go even more bass there. Sandara is a little relaxed between 2.5 and 3K, so it's a little more energy here. The interesting thing to me is this. That shows up there, and also here. Yeah, interesting. And looking at this, it shows up lower. So, I mean, the other thing here that could be going on is that it's a unique coupling interaction with my head, that both with the Sandara and this, because remember, the Sandara is not it's a headphone, right? And the Sandara's frequency response is from that headphone on my head, so it's not a target curve. So there might be some unique interaction going on there that is causing that. So I'll need to test and see, because when you have the EQ off, you definitely hear the 5.8 peak. So that is definitely there. But in any case, let me just do some music testing. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so there's definitely some weird interaction going on there with my head here. So I'm almost willing to say that this one, I mean, that one's definitely more accurate, but because this is a raw graph and the other one's compensated, right? So that's why that's confusing. That's a perfect example of why raw graphs are always more useful. But at the very least, when looking at this one, sorry, I'm going to start it up again here. At the very least, we can see that, hold on, is this compensated? Let's double check. I think it is. Yes, it is. So at the very least, the bass roll-off that you see here is not actually like that when it's worn on the head, at least my head. Maybe you have a head that's different, but yeah, like basically the information here is more representative in, let's say below 200 hertz. Yeah, let me just double check that, because I realized I only did one seating or one measurement of this. So let me double check. Take this off. And if we clear the calibration here as well, we'll see that on number 6, yeah, we'll see that the bass is going to go down here. Wait, what? Yeah, the bass went down. So that's sort of what I would expect, I guess. Something like that. Yeah. I had this on. So it does drop a little bit, but not as much as it shows on the Gross rig. Yeah, at around 30 hertz is where you actually start to see the drop off. But the overall elevation for the, like, even for most of the sub bass is still higher than that of the Sundara. So, yeah. Okay, now I'm going to switch it over here to, hold on a second. Put my glasses back on. Now I can actually see what I'm doing. All right. So I've now got 2 EQ profiles built out. Where is everybody here? And yeah, now let's do some, I guess let's just do some questions about the XC and about the X. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask them. What I've done is I've got 2 EQ profiles built out. I'm going to be going back and forth seeing for each of them now. I'll be going back and forth and seeing which one I prefer, whether it was, with the in-ear mics was better, or whether with the, using the Gross rig and adjustments there was better. My instinct right now is to say that all the stuff that exists in the mids and treble and all the adjustments that I made there were probably more accurate on the Gross rig on the XC, just with that like 5.8K peak there, because that's definitely audible. But apart from that, in both cases, these are massive improvements. I'm just going to get rid of the in-ear microphone because that feels weird. Feel free to, I guess, drop your questions in there, and I'll be getting to them as I see them. Some really interesting discussion going on here. I guess before doing that, I should also mention that people are kind of like down on Audeze for this change, and I get it, but I also think like you have to, like, the issue isn't that they released the new 2021 update, it's that they released that one from 2020 with the LCD-X in the first place, like that earlier one that had the really ridiculous measuring results. I think that's the bigger issue than them updating anything. And for whatever reason, people don't like, I mean, I get it, because if you bought something and then they change it and they release something better, it's like, oh man, I could have spent that same money if I just waited. But I really think it's like that with literally everything. And for that reason, I think what Audeze should do is just release these headphones with model year names attached. And that way you know whether or not yours is a 2020 version or a 2021 or a 2019 or 2022. And then you can have different, measurements showing up there, because I was saying this in the Headphone thread as well. Every manufacturer goes through revisions and updates and changes with certain materials, whether it's a supplier-based issue or just a manufacturing process change. You've seen this with mainstream brands as well, like Audio-Technica, Beyerdynamic, and Sennheiser, and Focal, and so it's a very common thing to have happen. The difference is with Hi-Fi Man as well. I mean, Sundara revision, right? I mean, I'm intimately familiar with what was changed there, and same thing with the Aria as well. So, the difference, as I see it, is that in this case, and to a certain extent with Sundara as well, but with the Audeze LCD-X and XC, more so the X, the change was so dramatic that it would warrant almost like, I don't know, it would warrant some sort of like version 2 or SE or something like that in my mind. But again, if they went with a model years approach, they could just make revisions to their heart's content, and then use different suppliers or whatever, and then nobody would have any issues with that. It's more so that people didn't know. I think that's really the concern. So I'm going to jump into the discussion here. I see a lot of interesting stuff going on here in the discussion. Are any other Audezes getting revisions? So this is something that I'm not aware of, but at least as far as I would assume that there's no changes to the other Audezes as far as the magnetic circuit or circuit design, anything to do with the drivers. I think if anything, the differences would have to do with the pads. And if that's the case, I think most of the tuning change, if not all of it, is the result of the pads. And so I don't know if that's happening, if they're getting those updates for the other ones, but I would certainly hope so, because especially with the Audeze LCD-4. I know the LCD-2 didn't measure that great either with the previous one with the memory foam pads, but the LCD-4 was particularly weird with that same pad, and so I really hope that they did that. The nice thing though about the LCD-4 is that I don't think there's that many of them out there in the wild that have that old pad, because the LCD-4 is such a high-priced item, not like the LCD-X's where a lot of people bought them, right? Now again, if you own an LCD-X, and you're wondering, how do I get it to sound like this? Again, I implore you to get into EQ with that, so you don't have to spend any money, because I know there's a lot of people who are just like, I don't ever EQ, but their profile's built out. I built one out, so it's very easy to do. And even with this one, sorry, the other LCD-X, even with this one, I personally I would still EQ that. Now again, sorry, you guys can't see it, right? Okay, well, you know what I mean. Even with the LCD-X, I would personally EQ it, just it doesn't require it the same way that the older version does. So, is the new revision LCD-X worth the $200 premium over the LCD-2? Yes, it is. Oh, some controversy going on here. Cable makes a difference as well if it's 3 cables or 4 cables. What? Any other oddities get? Yeah, okay, we went through that. Did the LCD MX4 get the same revision? Again, this is something that you're going to have to ask Audeze about, because I don't have an MX4, and I didn't even have a previous one. I never evaluated that headphone. How do the new earpads feel with glasses? Okay, so actually that's a good question. In general, the way that the new earpads feel is, it's interesting. They feel much more cushiony, like okay, this is the EMF pad I'm holding up here. The older ones, they felt this, when you did this on them, they felt stiffer, and it felt like springier in a way. These ones feel like, when you push it in, in general, like get the positioning well, they conform more to your head, it feels like. So in that, to answer your question, with glasses, these ones do very well. I think better than the previous ones. Just catching up. There's still the human element. Everything from Harman FR to equal loudness curves, Fletcher Munson, I imagine, comes from average of lots of people, not from everybody. What are you suggesting with that, though? I think a lot of people make claims about the Harman target curve. I've seen people make claims about the Harman target curve that are incorrect, because they assumed something that I think is very easy to assume, that it is just a average of people, and that's like the people just adjusted whatever they wanted, and they took the average of that. That's not really what happened. What happened was they had a very specific starting point, which was flat measuring speakers in an anechoic chamber. And because if you put those speakers into a good room, you're going to end up getting a different frequency response. It's going to be a little bit more downward tilted there. So if you imagine what that measurement would be at the eardrum, that was the starting point. Now then what happened there was Harman Research applied Sean Olive's target curve, I think that he did in 2009, someone can correct if I'm wrong on that, to that, and then proved that people preferred that curve, overwhelmingly preferred that curve over any of the other targets that existed, including free field and diffuse field, and the headphones default frequency response. I did a whole video on the Harman target. It's worth watching, especially if you have assumptions about the Harman target, because I had those same assumptions before actually reading the research. So if you don't want to read the research, that video is, I guess, a basic overview, but the research is worth reading as well. So while I'm critical of the Harman target in some aspects, it's a much better target curve than anything else that we have. So and like what I would criticize the Harman target is I don't like the well, first, the 2018 base level is ridiculous, but that's also because of all the Canadians. If you look at the segmentation and the demographic, or the segmentation data. But also, yeah, I generally don't like this dip here at around 200 hertz. I think it's fine if it's more of like a, filled in. But then also, I think it rolls off in the treble a little bit. So. What would be a reasonable step down from the LCD-X for critical listening? Why would you want to go down? Reasonable step down? Like in terms of how much it costs? A step down from the LCD-X. Well, LCD2. I was just trying... Okay, yeah. You guys are getting into it. Is the LCD-X getting... Okay, again, I don't know about any of the other Audeses. I know that... Well, apparently it's the pads that make most of the difference. So anything that's getting a pad update should have a better frequency response there. But what I love about this is that Audeze is definitely paying attention to measurements, and they've probably paid attention to them in the past, but I think they're really, they're focusing on it more than that more, I guess, scooped out upper mid-range section that they used to have. And it's nice to see them, I guess, returning to this, if anything. That's more of the way I'm looking at it, is they're returning to this. And in many ways, though, now, for people who are buying new Audeze LCD-Xs, in fact, new over your, like full-size Audezes in general, for whatever ones that had the pad update, this just kind of invalidates many of the existing reviews that are out there about those headphones, because that's no longer representative of what people would be buying today. That's the interesting thing about it. And as a reviewer, that's another reason why I want them to just come out with model years and just like lean into it hard and say, yeah, we make revisions every year, and it's to try and improve the product the same way that, when new cars come out, there's it's a model year thing, right? And then people can buy based on the year. And then, it makes it so that when you're reading a review of it or you're looking at measurements of it, when you publish the year for that, which is what I should probably do anyways. I mean, I have it here. You can't see it, but I have it, showing 2021. But people should probably just, say which version it is that they have so that they know that it's representative. How would the Dakoni suedes affect the sound? I'm not sure. I need to check that out at some point. What do I use for EQ? I use Equalizer APO, but you can also use Roon. Roon is my preferred tool for it, just because the visual interface is better. But the nice thing about EQ APO is that it affects the entire audio output stack, whereas Roon does not. It's just the stuff in Roon. You guys talk about cables. Yeah, I've never heard a difference in cables. Oh, thank you very much for the $5. I'm sorry, I don't know how to say that that name. What does the LCD-X bass response feel like? I guess my question is, can you feel the bass instead of hear the bass for planar headphone? Yeah, so both the LCD-X and the XC have better macro dynamics than what you get with like the DCA headphones or like the Hi-Fi Man Ananda and Aria. But that is a trend with modern planar magnetic headphones, is that you don't get that sort of physical sense of impact the way that you do with electrodynamic or moving coil headphones. So and it's a little bit baffling as to why, because it's not measured bass response. It's not at all. Because even on the DCA headphones, when you EQ them up like crazy in the bass, they still sound super dead. So, oh yeah, that was one other thing I wanted to test was the air gap behavior. I might actually just have to do that after the stream here, because we're already into the Q&A session. I don't know how much people really care about that, but that could be another parameter, is the resonance frequency when you do the air gap measurements. But yes, to answer your question, they do have a better sense of bass impact, more so on the XC than the X, I find, but much better than typical modern planar magnetics. But I would contrast that with still not as good as open back dynamic driver headphones, or closed back as well, that punch really hard, like the Focals. Like the Focal Clear punches harder than this even, right? So If you're really looking for macro dynamics, I would say go with the Focal. What about Rune Audeze profiles? Yeah, so when this gets released, that I mean, I still think that, like, as much as I like Reveal Plus, because they have, you know, changed or they've made revisions, so many revisions, it's impossible. Those always have to be more conservative than would be ideal, because how do you create a EQ profile for all of the different headphones, especially when there are revisions that are that, you know, drastic? But yet again, this is another thing that just points to it being such a good idea to have model years, so that you could then build those model years into your Reveal Plus, you know, profiles. So no, I wouldn't use the Audeze Rune profiles. No, but I mean, you can try it by all means if you like it, but yeah, that's not something I recommend. Let's see. People are worried about individual hearing differences. If the headphone measures flat compensated on any given rig, then it should roughly measure flat to your ears. Depends what the compensation is. Like, if you compensate it, if you compensate it with a diffuse field target, that won't sound flat to anybody's ears. So it all depends on the compensation. But actually, the individual hearing differences thing is also a bit of a red herring, because in theory there should be quite a bit more agreement between how people hear things. Because if you think about, like, the reason why, let me just actually switch to, hold on. Okay, I'm just gonna leave it here like this because it's easier. So if you think about the reason why ear gain is essential, right? It's because this is where our ears are amplifying certain frequencies, right? So, like, generally here is where the pinna gain is, and then the overall level is largely due to the ear canal, and then this is where your concha is, right? So that's why it dips there. So, and that's that little part, like this little part in here, right? So the ear's amplifying certain frequencies, and our brains are correcting for the amplification that our ears impart. This means that if you had something that perfectly matched what your ear, like measured at the eardrum, if it perfectly matched what the brain would expect to hear, it would be elevated here, right? You would see that elevation. So everybody's going to have a unique ear. Everybody's outer and, you know, ear canal, pinna and ear canal. And so the thinking might be that this would mean that people would actually hear things differently, but that's not really the case, at least for most people. I think there's probably limits and thresholds to this, but because the brain is already correcting for, you know, the gain factors that our ears are imparting, that means that for every unique pinna and ear canal, you're also going to have a unique normalization from the brain. The brain is going to be normalizing that regardless. And so that's why, you know, it doesn't really matter that people have different ears. Now, again, I think that's I say in theory there, because I think there are going to be cases, especially to the extremes, where, you know, sound waves take a totally different path to the eardrum, and then you get totally different gain factors. And I think this and the fringes and the edges, I do think that probably accounts for some of the differences in impressions. But what I think is more likely is, like, for the reason why people have different impressions, is more to do with expectations and understanding of what stuff should sound like. And if you, so for example, if your expectation is that something is going to, and then what your, I guess, like, preference is a bit of a cop out, but, like, that's why I say expectations, because if you expect neutral to be diffuse field, anything with anything that measures flat in the bass is going to sound bass boosted to you, and then you report that it sounds bass boosted. But if you expect it to be Harman, then a flat in the bass is not going to be enough bass. So really, I think that's more where that question comes into play, and that accounts for the differences. Thank you, Michael. How is the LCD-X soundstage versus LCD-2? They're basically the same, as far as I can tell. I mean, yeah, they have very similar design. I don't hear The advantage of like some of the hi-fi man stuff that has the massive diaphragms, and the huge, cups, those have better soundstage than these. But across, between the LCD-X and the LCD2, the soundstage is decent. It's not great, but also not bad. I hope that answers your question. And very incisive and precise for the imaging. I wouldn't say the most even or accurate necessarily. Planars generally aren't as good as some dynamics, but very distinct. Ryan, thank you very much. Don't have a question, just saying thanks for all the reviews and content. You're very welcome. I'm glad you appreciate it. I hope this stuff is useful to you guys. That's the whole point. I'm wondering how these new revisions would affect your closeback recommendations. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it depends if you want a dynamic driver presentation or a planar presentation. But for technical performance, this is up there with the best that I've ever heard, the LCD-XC. And then EQ'd, like dialed in, it's one of the best experiences you can have. My complaint with this is that it's still 670 grams, whereas the VC and the Stellia are both like half that. No, not half that, but it's a lot less. So they're in the 450 gram range, so considerably lighter, which is nice. Did I miss any of the... I want to make sure I didn't miss anything. How much more sensitive is the LCD-X than the LCD-2F? I assume you mean F. How more sensitive? Yeah, noticeably. I mean, the LCD-2F. Okay, here's the thing: most amps that are even like inexpensive can drive an LCD-2F. It's not like an LCD-4. But and so if you can drive an LCD-2F, you can drive an LCD-X. So I'm not really sure that... I don't know if that would influence whether or not you should exchange it. Exchange it? Like, yeah, I don't know if that's really something that's worth considering there. The main advantage of the LCD-2F over the LCD-X is the weight. LCD-2F I could get through a whole day, no problem. LCD-X, it's pushing it. But yeah, the LCD-X is definitely more detailed. LCD2 Classic is nowhere near as good as the LCD-X for detail. LCD2 Classic is not even as good as the LCD2F. Okay, let's see. You need a perfect ADC that can measure multiple frequencies played back simultaneously. You can do that. It's not about multiple frequencies being played simultaneously. Yeah, you're talking about an FFT or a real-time analysis, right? This is actually what Jude does to ensure coupling consistency, as far as I understand, like to ensure that there's symmetry for how he's measuring both sides, left and right. And so he basically does a low-res FFT, I think, and that gives him an indication, a picture of what the frequency response is. So that'll help him adjust that, which is ideal. I wish I could do that but I only have I only have one, and I also don't have an audio precision. Does the LCD-X come with a personalized measurement of that unit when you purchase one new? I don't think so. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong about that one. This I didn't notice one with LCD-XC, but the LCD-X over there was one that was sent to me by Audeze. This one is my... Well, they're both sent by Audeze, I guess, obviously. But this one is my own personal unit. Does this revision mean EQ is no longer necessary? Yep. But it is still optional and still something that, I do recommend, and I do. So, yeah, EQ, to your preference. And, use the profile that I built out there. How's the comfort of the new pads compared to the old ones? I think the new ones are more comfortable because and then it's also lighter. In both cases, they're lighter. Is an EQ'd old revision X equal to a new X sonically? Yeah, you'd be able to get them to the same level. Yeah. But, within, ballpark, because it's there's always going to be some room for variation because the pads are huge. But yeah, in theory, you'd be able to get the same kind of sound of the old one. Just use that EQ profile that I built out like a long time ago. I keep my cables in a freezer for 24 hours cryo before listening. Just yeah. If anybody wants to really level up their no, don't do that. Yeah, no, cables don't make a difference. Yes, they make a difference in the sense of they are more convenient if you get a nicer one, or they look nicer, or like I love the ergonomics of these Audeze ones. They're not microphonic either. They also make a difference if you're comparing interconnects. Like interconnects make more of a difference than these types of cables do, because with interconnects you may run into issues where there's some issue going on. There's a problem with the shielding or something like that. Or I've had USB cables where the connectors were dirty, and essentially, I classify that as just broken at that point. And that introduced some artifact issues, like very obviously very obvious issues. So I think if in that sense, having good quality interconnect cables like between your DAC and your amp, especially if you're using a tube amp, you do want to use shielded interconnect cables, but they're not expensive. They're like $30, $20. You can get Blue Jean cable that's shielded. So yeah, I don't know if I would say you need to go out and buy ridiculously expensive cables. I just don't think that's it. And even if you think it does make a difference, right? Because there are a lot of people who do. This is an interesting point actually about psychoacoustics. If you think that it's making a difference and it's causing you to pay more attention, the question is more of a philosophical one there at that point, where it's does it actually sound better to that person? And I can see an argument saying that even though it doesn't change anything acoustically, that yes, it does actually sound better to the person who thinks it does, because they're paying attention to things. So much about what sounds good and an experience, expressing an experience, or trying to communicate that, is anchored to what people paid attention to when they were evaluating. And you could listen to really high-end headphones like these just as background music, and just like not pay attention to the music at all, and you're really not going to be thinking about the differences in technical performance or frequency response or anything else. So a lot of it is attention, and if cables make you pay more attention, then great. Askew, thank you. If you could only have 4 headphones in your personal collection and pretend you have none now, a 3K budget or cheaper for each, which a 3K budget for each, or a 3K budget total, which ones would you get and complement each other and cover all music? Good. 4 is a very specific question, or specific number. Let's see. A 3K budget. If we're talking about like each, like in total a 3K budget, I would go with probably an LCD-XC and then EQ it just slightly. Then probably, so that's like 1200. Then maybe see, 4 headphones is tough at that budget, because I think like my advice is to spend that entire 3K on one headphone or get an LCD-XC and then spend the rest on one other headphone. That's sort of what I would do. Yeah. Now, if we're talking about, and those would be the LCD-XC for closeback, and then for open back, yeah, I'd maybe go with like a HD 800S or Focal Clear, or yeah, something like that. And then if it's 3K budget for each of them. Oh, I see, and cheaper for each. I see, gotcha. In that case, that becomes more challenging. For closeback, it would be either a ZMF Verite closed or LCD-XC, depending on the weight constraints, like if you can handle a heavy headphone. But getting the LCD-XC does save you a lot of money, and I mean, if it's so interesting because like the LCD-XC and the LCD-X, if I'm comparing them directly to the Verite, because I have the Verite here, but it's my Verite, for micro detail and microdynamics and like the trailing ends of tones, I think they're very close. If I had to give an advantage, it would be just slightly to the Verite, just for trailing ends of tones only, microdynamics. For instrument separation, I think these do better. So it's such a tough choice there. But obviously the Verite is way more comfortable because it's way lighter. And also the Verite pairs better with tube amps, so that's really kind of what I ended up doing. Hey, and Marcello, thanks for stopping by, man. Good to see you. I hope your stream went well. I hope that was, and I apologize for initially scheduling this at around the same time because it didn't show up in my YouTube recommendations, and so I didn't even see that you were doing it. So it was not intentional. Solution to LCD-XC weight is get buff. Yeah, sorry. Okay, getting back onto this question here. So that would be one of them, either VC or LCD-XC. The other one would be, I'd probably have an HD100S in there, just because you got to do something to get, it does one thing extremely well in that soundstage. It does detail well as well, and it's also really light. So yeah, that would be up there. A third one, something from Focal for that punch. I mean, it's tough because 3K. I mean, could you stretch it to 4K? Because then I'd say Focal Utopia. Utopia is still just such a fantastic headphone. Otherwise, if you can't stretch it, then yeah, clear. But I mean, I would try and get a Utopia because that's pretty close. And then maybe for the last one, a head audio headphone for just something totally different for the presentation. Yeah, I think that's what I would do. Now, though, personally, if I had all that money, I would just buy a Susvara and then for one headphone, and then for the other one, I don't know, I get a VC or something like that, because I like the idea of having one planar and one dynamic, one that works great with tubes and another one that works great with really powerful solid state amplifiers. That's really what I'm into. LCD-XC compared to Ether 1.1C Flow. Again, like the downside with the DCA stuff is that it has nothing for dynamics. So, I mean, the advantage is that they're lighter and more comfortable. Although that one did have a little bit of clamp force that I wasn't too into. I have heard it, but the LCD-XC is absolutely more detailed as well. So it's not close on the technical performance side of things, but what shows up there is a pretty significant trade-off for comfort and usability for long listening sessions. So, but really, I think the best DCA headphone that I evaluated was the Aeon 2 Noir with perforated pads. It's the same. It has the same drawbacks of no macro dynamics, but still, the tuning was pretty good there. The detail was good. The image separation was good. So, and the form factor, comfort were great as well. So yeah. When will you review the LCD-XC, the new ones? Comparison to be really nice to ZMF and DCA, I think. Oh, Dan Clark, yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of what this live stream is about. But yeah, I'll need to do a video on these next week, I'm pretty sure. So I'm gonna let you guys in on a secret here, okay? And it's a big deal, and only you guys know about this so far. And so you know how we do like giveaways every month on this channel? Which, by the way, if you're not subscribed already, subscribe so you can win in the giveaway. Well, this month's giveaway is going to be an LCD-X, one of the new ones. So if you want to sign up for it, I've seen a few people sign up already, but we haven't made an official announcement for that yet. But we will be doing it next week. It was the Easter weekend, kind of just threw a wrench into the plans a little bit for getting that out there. But yeah, so we'll be doing a giveaway this month for the LCD-X, and I'll do a video on the differences between the update essentially, and in a more condensed fashion for what we talked about here. But essentially, you have all the information that I will be talking about in those videos. Yeah, if you guys want to sign up for that giveaway, the link is already there, or the not the link, but the page is already up. So it's headphones.com/pages/giveaways, and the form is already available. All right, so I'll do another 15 minutes here, and then call it. So yeah, more questions. Let's go. Who here has one headphone? 7 headphones. Did Audeze change their pad? Seems like they have less cushion. That's what this has been all about. Yes, they have. Do the LCD-XC isolate well? Not as well as the Aeon 2 Noir, and not as well as the Celeste either, or the Radiance, but better than the HD820. And so yeah, I'd say it's somewhere middle of the road as far as isolation goes. It isolates well enough for my situation where, you know, I don't live alone and nobody can hear, you know, when I'm listening to my you know, ridiculous black metal. No, I'm just kidding. My serious audiophile music. LCD-XC Ananda OG Clear for $990. Oh, OG Clear for $990. Well, XC is closed back. The XC, it's been possibly my favorite headphone experience in the sense that it's a closed back. There are real advantages to it. Like, just, I know Kryn hates closed backs, all closed backs. So, and to a certain extent, I agree there are limitations there. But the advantage of a closed back is that you don't get the intrusions all the time. Now, personally, I prefer open back, but I still think that, you know, this with EQ is just like on another level for the experience. And remember, headphones, it's a very personal experience. It's a more, you know, isolated experience compared to speakers, at least. And for that, the advantages of a closed back really do resonate with me. You could replace all those I know what those 4, I know what SOTA choices are, but I like the GL2000 suggestion. No, the GL2000, I think it's one of those things where if people don't know what stuff's supposed to sound like, or they don't have a reference point, then something like that can actually sound really exciting because it has this extra upper treble air that enhances the perception of detail. And so if somebody's, like, for example, if you're not sensitive to the percussion compression issues that show up there with that headphone, that DMS also noticed. I mean, it's compression, it's 5K compression, but I call it percussion compression because I notice it most strongly on, like, you know, snare drum hits, cymbal hits, and stuff like that, where basically the resonant harmonics are out of balance there. If somebody isn't sensitive to that at all because they don't have that as the reference point for real life, then, you know, they're not going to be bothered by it. And that's not a bad thing at all. I think it's totally fine. Like, you know, that could even potentially sound pleasant to somebody, but no, I don't think the GL2000 is a particularly good headphone. Before EQ. After EQ, it sounded like a, you know, slightly more depth-focused Sandara, which is great. Getting into lots of questions here. It's awesome. Hey, what's up, Sheldon? Good to see you. Do you think that if DCA puts out an Ether 3, it'll be any good? They seem to be making some improvement with the Aeon line, but the Ether line's been dormant for quite some time. Yeah. I want them to. I want them to succeed because I like they have really interesting designs. Like the physical mechanical design is really interesting. Um, but the Ether, I need to still hear the Ether 2 with the different pads. But I also think fundamentally they need to change their approach to their planar diaphragm designs and just their whole designs and like all their what they're doing. I don't think they're going to be able to achieve, the the macro dynamics that people want with their current design philosophy. But I think it's one of those questions of when push comes to shove. Also, what's weird is some people don't even hear that at all. Like they don't notice or care about the lack of dynamics. Like if you look at like the stuff that Amir from ASR recommends all the time, all of it is DCA stuff. So, and all of them are super dead sounding. So I just like some people are just not discerning for that quality, and other people are really discerning for it. Like for me, it matters a little bit. It doesn't matter as like that much, but it does matter. And for somebody like Max Settings, he cares about that like on an equal level with detail. So whereas like Metal 571 and Android and myself, we definitely care about detail more than that. And other people don't care about any of those. They just care about timbre. They're timbre heads, and they only listen to the HD 580. so yeah. If I buy a special edition of an Ether Flow, will DC personally come and punch me to make up for it? Yes. Oh, God. Utopia on top of the line, tube amp versus Susvara. The detail on the Susvara is just like on another level. Like, yes, the Utopia I would even argue punches harder. But man, the Susvara is next level. Headphone is probably my end game. I could see it being an end game for somebody. Just make sure you got a lot of power in your amplifier. High current is what you want there. Really high current. Similar to what you get with the planar, like the inefficient planars. But yeah, the weight on the headphone is the only issue for me with that one. And there's some weird feature down in the like lower mids with that one, but not on all, because the one that I evaluated didn't have that problem. So I don't know. Let's see. Haven't heard the LCD-I4. Not yet. Just mounted in the ceiling. I need to catch up here, guys. Any competition to the XC under 2000? No. So the Audeze headphones are not super competitive when it comes to frequency response, but they are hyper competitive for technical performance. For the LCD2F, not the C, LCD-X, LCD-XC, and LCD4. I haven't heard the 3 though. Well, I heard it like years ago, but so I don't know what's going on with the C right now, or with the 3. But I guess the mainstay, well-known full-sized LCDs have insane technical performance that outclasses pretty much everything else in their price brackets, but they don't always achieve that same kind of level of competition or competitiveness with their tunings, as is evidenced by this whole conversation. But that's also why I think the people who are getting into this stuff, it really does benefit you to learn how to EQ. And actually, the reason for this is often missed, I think, is that headphone design involves trade-offs, and Audeze has almost, well, not in every case, but traditionally they've erred on the side of not designing for frequency response, for good measurements. They're designing much more for technical performance. And so, for example, you would probably be able to get this frequency response to even more closely match this target by using some sort of acoustic treatment that may have the negative consequence of blunting the detail in certain ways or blunting the dynamics in certain ways. And I think Audeze doesn't want to do that. That's just my suspicion. And because of that, this is like kind of the best of both worlds. You're getting probably the best technical performance for the price at all of those intervals: LCD2F, LCD-X, LCD-XC, and LCD4. Just with you being the one who has to do the EQ usually. Less so now with this revision. But yeah. Does Resolve listen to Baby Metal? Not if I don't have to. Are the Focal Legia better than the Sandara? No. Well, it's an open back headphone, the Sandara. The Legia is closed back, so no. There's always the caveat of for a closed back, right? I guess lots of chatter about lots of folks chatting about the DCA headphones. Oh, Denon AHD 9200 or Audeze LCD-XC for metal music? Easily the XC. For metal, but again, EQ it, please. Like boost the bass on that, on the XC, and then drop the. Just wait. I'll have the profile posted up on the forum, but yeah, for metal, because there's so much stuff going on in the recordings, and it's all like complex is the wrong term here because not all metal is complex, but there's lots going on, and in order to get perfect, like better clarity for all the different pieces that are going on, these high performance planars are always going to give you a better sense of image clarity and distinction and incisiveness than similarly priced dynamic driver headphones. So you just get a better overall sense of clarity there. So I do recommend it. Control during busy passages is what I've called it before. How does XC compare to the Stellia? Yeah, I give the technical performance edge to the... Well, it's just planar versus dynamic in a way, but I would almost give the detail edge to the XC. Closed versus open, planar versus dynamic. There are a lot of differences. Solution? Buy both. Yes. Well, I mean, I got to caveat that a little bit. I think if you're going to buy a high-end headphone, it's generally better to go for the open backs than closed backs, because as everybody's pointed out, and you know correctly, I think there are many limitations to closed backs, but the traditional use of headphones would have been, you know, to isolate you from, you know, when you are not in an environment where speakers are, you know, usable. So, yeah, in that sense, there are also some counterexamples like where the closed backs are better than the open backs. So, like I think the VC is probably better than the VO. Yeah. Stellia is solid. Good performance there. It's nice because it's also really comfortable. I have one here actually. It's yeah, I like it. What's the most comfortable headphone for long listening sessions? Still probably the AudioQuest Night Owl or Nighthawk. I also really like the Verite with the suede, the BE2 suedes. Also HD800S, super lightweight. How does the revised LCD-X now compare to the Rossen Rad Zero? Well, quite a bit closer actually. So weirdly, the LCD-X actually has more ear gain than the Rad Zero does at the 2 to 3K region. Less at the 4K region. So that's kind of the main. So Rossen, the Rad Zero is smoother here. The LCD-XC is smoother here. I think the Rad Zero is got a little bit more bass. A little more. But yeah, it's a lot more competitive now. Would you recommend the LCD-X or Focal Clear MG? I think I would take the LCD-X over the Focal Clear MG, but if you really want that dynamic punch and impact, then the Clear MG would give you that more so than the X. The X is good at macro dynamics for a planar, because many planars are not, especially the more modern ones. So I just think it depends on which qualities you're looking at. Again, I personally preferred the original Clear, but yeah, depends on what you're looking for. You've heard Abyss is coming out with closebacks. That'd be interesting. If Focal comes out with Utopia closeback, well, that's the Stellia, kind of. It's a different tuning, but yeah. And Audeze with new improved LCD-4 closeback. Imagine that. Yeah, could you imagine an LCD-4 closeback? 1,500 grams, I bet. No, just kidding. But yeah, that would be pretty crazy. They got to make that stuff lighter. Same with the Abyss. Like, they got to make it more lightweight than that. It's 630 grams, I think, for that. The big one, something like that, 640. Yeah, it is lighter. The LCD-XC is lighter as well. I'm not sure about magnetic structure, but the circuit is different, apparently. But also keep in mind that the pad material is completely different, like the actual foam material is completely different, so that can have an impact on weight. Resolve doesn't turn around because he doesn't want us to see his toned neck. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, not everybody's going to be into EQ, so if you're not into EQ, I would say, you could probably find headphones that like would have a better default frequency response than these, but these are also now at the point of EQ optional, not essential. Are there any more surprises coming from Audeze? Be honest. I am being honest. I have no idea. They do not tell me. I don't work for Audeze, so so I have no idea. I have, the interactions that I've had with Sankar have just been about like these two and the Euclid. That's it. Hey Quinn, thank you. This has been so incredibly helpful. Thank you. Well, thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I hope this stuff is helpful to you guys. Maybe I'll do a poll for like the next live testing session for what headphones I should, try out for that. Yeah, I should be actually evaluating some e-stats pretty soon here. I see your comment there about e-stats. I'm hopeful to try out the 009 if I get a chance. Hi, Tile from Inner Fidelity here. I missed that guy. How do you know if you're dead inside? Good question. It's more just a general state of well-being, or lack thereof. LCD-X, Focal Clear, or ZMF Tour for metal, EDM, and synthwave. LCD-X. Focal Clear would be good for that as well. I think so with the Auteur, that would be more my pick for like the serious audiophile music, like classical and acoustic. It's got a more spacious presentation and it's more about timbre, I think. LCD-X for the control during busy passages, I bet would be my recommendation, but maybe somebody doesn't want that, so it's all up to you which qualities you're looking for. I don't know. I've never heard a Grado that's been any good. Do you recommend an amp with the X, or is a cheap audio interface good enough? Probably good enough. I mean, as soon as you have a separate piece, like a DAC amp combo or something like that, that you've taken outside of your computer or whatever you're trying to run whatever the source is, that's generally going to be good enough for these because they don't take a ton of power. You could run it from a phone if you wanted to. Or, well, maybe that wouldn't be ideal, but you know what I mean, right? Like, you don't need a lot. Was there an LCD-5 that was shown at a Shanghai headphone show? I didn't even know about that. Honestly, guys, I know nothing about any upcoming thing. The only thing I knew about was the Euclid, as I mentioned. Which actually, I should have a review of the Euclid out soon. Okay, 2 more questions. I feel like Hi-Fi-Man would make a good close-back too. Not unless there was something wrong with the R10P that I tried. Have you actually heard the Denon D9200s? I found them to be far superior to the LCD-XCs with EQ, although they were the previous version of these. Yeah, it depends on so many things with that. I have heard the 9200s briefly. I haven't had them here for review. But no, I do not think that they were on the same level for technical performance. But when it comes to the question of tonal balance, then yeah, maybe. I need to get one in for like actually spend more time with it though. That's the thing. I mean, you could say the same thing is probably true for the VC. All right, the VC has really good technical performance as well, and I would need to have it side by side with this to be able to tell which is more technically capable. But this is like half the price of that, so. How much do these weigh? These are 670 grams, 671 for these ones. Yeah, I also noticed the treble unpleasantness of the Starfield. I don't think it's not 18K where the problem is. Like for me, my hearing starts to roll off there at around 17K. I think it's actually lower than that. I think it's closer to 15K. But there's definitely a resonance up there on the Starfield. Yeah, and like it's funny. I was talking to Metal 571 about this, and he's like, "Man, I'm not bothered by the treble at all." And I'm like, and both Chrono and I were like, "Yeah, that the treble is like." Bit too intense. But so yeah, not everybody's going to notice that because for a lot of people their hearing kind of rolls off in the upper air regions. I actually don't know how much the D9200 is. What is SOTA? SOTA. But thank you, Marius. Always good to have you in the streams. What did they weigh before? They weighed well, the one with the wooden cups that I had before was 750 over 750 grams, like between 750 and 760, something like that. I think it depends on if you weigh it with the cable or not. Yeah. Okay, guys, I'm going to call it for the stream. Thanks to everybody for tuning in, and I hope this has been useful. I will publish this information up on the Headphone Community Forum if you guys are looking for it and you want to see my EQ profiles. But then also, I'll be doing a video reviews, I guess, of both of these, or like, I guess, update videos next week. And then, so it's going to be a little bit of an Audeze month. Not intentional, it just happened to be that way. But then also, yeah, we're giving away... We, as in headphones.com, are giving away an LCD-X with a 2021 update. So definitely sign up to win this. If you weren't here when I mentioned that, yeah, it's on the main giveaway page on headphones.com. But yeah, until next time, I will sign off. Bye, everybody.